I'm going to show you how to make a reusable space background environment that you can use in either Eevee or Cycles. But real quick before we get into it, if you enjoyed this tutorial or any of my other content and would like to help support me, I do have a Patreon. For $5 a month, you can become a viewer like you and get a shout out at the end of every video. You can find the link in the description or the channel information. Now, as with custom for every single Blender tutorial out there, the first thing we need to do is press A to select everything, and banish the default cube and its hangers-on into the Shadow Realm. Because we're not going to need them for a little bit at least. Now that cuboidal scum is now out cluttering up our scene, we can start actually doing this tutorial. But before we get into making the space background, we need to do a little bit of setting changes. See, to do this, we need to be in the Cycles rendering engine. And the Cycles rendering engine defaults suck. So to fix it, the very first thing we need to do, which I'm sure anyone who's used Cycles has told you, is to go from using CPU to GPU compute. And that is where a lot of people don't tell you everything you need to know. Because just switching it to GPU compute won't actually make it use your graphics card. To make sure it's using your graphics card and thus not being slow as dirt, you need to come over to Edit, Preferences, and make sure it's using one of these. Now, which one of these it uses depends on what type of graphics card you're using, but it's pretty easy to figure out which is which. Just find out what type of graphics card you have, Google which one of these works with what type of graphics card, enable that one. For an NVIDIA, use this one. Now that we're actually using our graphics card, we are going to adjust our noise threshold settings on both the viewport and rendered versions to be, for this, about 0.4. Normally I'll do 0.5, but we do want a little extra precision in this because it's going to be a bigger image and more noise will be more noticeable. But what adjusting the noise threshold is where it stops recalculating to reduce the noise. The higher your number, the more noise you're going to have. The lower the number, the less noise you're going to have. But also the lower the number, the significantly longer it takes to do it. Then we're going to enable denoise, which smooths over any of the remaining noise in the image. We're going to make sure denoise is using GPU on both the viewport and rendered versions. Down here in performance, on the compositor, we're going to say use GPU. On the denoising, we're going to say use GPU. And on memory tile size, we're going to cut that in half by going /2 to divide it. And on final render, use persistent data, which means it won't be constantly recalculating the compositing. All of that will make Cycles go from taking forever to just a decent bit of time. It's still not going to be insanely fast unless you have, one of the amount of money it takes to buy a house graphics cards, but it'll be faster. And with that done, we can start actually making the space background. To start actually making our space background, we're going to come up to the Shading tab, change it from the Material Shader view to the Rendered Shading view. We can hide this pane in the side, it's not going to be usable for us. And we are going to change it from Object Shading, or Object Shader type, to World. And here is where we're going to do a large portion of what's going to make our space background. We are going to take this background node and drag this slider all the way down to make it pure black. We're going to drag out a mix shader node and put an emission in on the other slot. And from here on the factor, we're going to drag out a color ramp. And from there, a noise texture. We're going to up the noise texture scale to something really high, like say 100. Give or take. And we're going to drag the black of this color ramp a lot closer to somewhere about right here. This part is very easy to get lost in playing around on, but this, sure. Something about like this should suffice. But again, that's something you can play around with, adjusting the scale of your noise texture and how far back you have your, sliders clamped. But that back to 100. Something like this should suffice for now. On our emission value over here, we're going to set it to something like 25, maybe 50, depending on how bright you need your stars to be. And now that we have something actually glowing, we're going to go into compositing, say new, and in between the image and our output things over here, we're going to drag this out and say glare set to bloom. We'll set our quality to high. And let's go take a look at what that looks like. We'll go back into shading. And now up here, we're going to enable always so we can see what our compositing is doing. And that is a little more glow than I personally want for this. So I'm going to drop the emission down to 25. And that's more about what I want. We can do something similar here to add more stars of varying colors or just different patterning. So we can take another mix shader, put it after our first one, another emission, Shift E to duplicate. Plug that to here, and for this one, let's make it a more yellow color. And then we can take another noise and color ramp, plug them into here, and then just shift the scale a little bit so they're not in the exact same spot. Maybe make them a little smaller with the black slider. Bring this one up closer so they're more intense. Something about like that. And you can repeat that to get it with whatever colors you want to add more colors of stars. Again, something you kind of just play around with till you like it. But I think that works. Yeah. Now, if you just want stars and nothing and pure black for your space background, you can skip over a little bit. But if you want to have space dust, nebula swirls of something like that, you can take another mix shader, or if you want to keep things a little cleaner, you can get rid of that mix shader. Plug that back into where it's supposed to be. We can actually just go to our background and on our color, pull out a color ramp and do it through this. From it, we can bring out a noise texture to control this. And now we will pull this out and up the detail. Right, to where it looks kind of like a gas plume of sorts. Let's lower the scale so it's a little bigger. And now we will replace this white with a high intensity version of whatever color we want, a very high value version of whatever color we want to be our clouds. We want our clouds to be. I cannot talk for some reason today. And we will click the plus button to add a couple more sliders in here. Let's make this one more blue, up its value, but not as much. And then maybe one more here, maybe a bit more blue, something like that. That works. You can do this with all kinds of colors, or there is the other way of doing this. We'll disconnect that for now. And we will add in another shader on top of this, where we will pull this out and go, we want a hue saturation. It's not going to pull that up for us. So we will go noise texture. Are you not going to cooperate? Okay. We'll come over here and grab our noise texture then. And from its color output, we will take a hue saturation value. Make sure this is actually connected to the color, not the hue. And then on the saturation, we'll crank it to something like 50. And plug that in here. Pretty crazy looking right now, but when we take another color ramp and plug our noise texture into that. We can mess with it. Maybe turn that saturation down a little so it's not as crazy. Not all the way though. Let's try 3. 3's not terrible. Play around with the settings a little bit. Maybe like that if we want more random color in our space dust. You can even combine the two methods to have something like that, and then just, for example, change this to this, and you slide the W slider around so it's not in the exact same spot. Just play around with the settings so it's smoothed about. Something like that, which gives us a lot of different colored space dust, but with a predominant blue. And I think I will go with this because I like my space backgrounds to be a bit more fantasy sci-fi than realistic. But like I said, you can just have it be stars and voids, or however much space dust mixed in with this noise texture method you want. And that will... Actually, now that we have this, we need to brighten our stars a little bit more so they shine through. So let's set that to 50. And that to 50. Okay, how about 75? It's a little bit better. Pretty bright, but, you know, it's supposed to be fun and vibrant. And now that that is made, we'll go back into Layout, Viewport, enable that so we see the glow. And we could stop here. We could just have this be the background that we can then plug into future projects. Or we could add some more stuff to the scene. For example, we can take a default cube, welcome back, and start messing with it. For a moment, I'll turn that off. We're going to come over here to edit mode, and we're just going to go face select, just extrude some faces. Scale them a little bit. Not going super careful. We're just trying to make a blob. We're just getting a blocky blob. Something like that. And maybe those out a bit. Shrink it down. Move it over. Wiggle it around. Something like that. Now we'll give it a subdivision. Maybe 2. About like that. Shade smooth. Apply that. We'll duplicate it a time or two. Shift D. We'll scale them around a little. Make them a little bit different. Rotate them. Maybe even go into sculpt, not vertex paint, sculpt mode, and just kind of wiggle one of these around so they're a little bit different. Do the same on this one. That's edit mode, not sculpt mode. Maybe we'll use clay strips to do the scriboingling on this one. And with that, we've got 3 different distinct space rocks. We can repeat this for as much we can beat this as many times as we want different space rocks. So just go into edit mode, extrude a couple faces, maybe select a couple at a time, do something like that. Then give it a subdivision modifier twice over, apply it, sculpt mode, scriboingle them around. Shade smooth, duplicate, shrink it, smush it, rotate it, sculpt it. Just get some variation on it. Do that for as many times as you want, for as many different types of space rock as you want. And then we can go into shading them. Zoom in. We'll actually go into this view because it's a little easier to understand what we're doing. And it will change it from world back to object. So we're actually editing the object. Give it a texture. Just do something simple, like a little brown. Pull out a bump node. Put in a noise into that. Up the distance. up the detail on the noise, up the scale on the noise, something like that. And then we can just give everything, click and drag this, put it to there, give everything the same texture. And then on this one, actually, let's make it a little more interesting than this. We will grab a noise ramp out of the factor, give us a color ramp. Instead of the white, we will take the initial color we had, add in one more, make it something like that, and plug it in to the color here. That gives us even more interesting space rock. We can up the detail a little bit more to make it less smooth, lower the roughness, up the roughness a little bit, something like that. We got space junk. Now, we take all of these, right click, and say, move to collection. For this, we'll just call it rock, just whatever you wanted to call it. And now we will bring in a icosphere, because I want to be different and not use a regular sphere. And we will scale it up, way up. So far up, it starts to clip out of view, something like that. And we will give this icosphere a hair particle system. We'll click on Advanced, enable rotation, and on Render, we will change it from Path to Collection and set it to be our rock. We will change the, where is it here? Source from Faces to Volume, and boom! We got asteroids and rocks and everything scattered all around. In Render, we will click Show Emitter to not show the emitter, and now the icosphere itself won't be visible. We go into Rendered View, we don't see it anymore. But we don't see our surroundings. That is because while we don't see it, it still affects things. To fix that, we go over to this, Object Properties. In Visibility, we uncheck Shadow, and now the light can still pass through it. But it's still not behaving right. So we can come over here, New, give it a texture, and just give it 0 alpha, which makes it completely transparent. And that should fix it. Make sure it has no shadow. We can go over into the hair properties and just mess with things, randomize the rotation a little, set it to something so it actually affects that. Maybe give it a bit more scale so our space rocks are a bit bigger, some scale randomness so there's variation in their size, something like that. We can unselect it or just hide our things so we don't see. Let's add a sunlight. About like this. Unhide that so we can actually see what we're doing. Pick whatever kind of angle we want our main bright light to be coming from. Up the exposure a little. Up the strength a little. Give it kind of an orangey red, a little bit of an orangey red for sun color. Up the exposure however bright you want it to be. Something like that. Drop the angle a little so it doesn't bounce around as much. Something like that. Now we got space rocks everywhere. And we can, while we can't hide these ones, we can either just move them around so they're just lost to the asteroid field, or we can have them all be bunched up together in a spot where we're not going to need to worry about seeing them. If you don't want your space rock asteroids scattered around just kind of everywhere, we can hide that icosphere for a second. You can instead pull out a cylinder, mesh cylinder, scale that up, scale it down on the Z, hide that for a second. We can go into edit mode, delete the top and bottom faces, A to select everything, E to extrude, scale that down a little on that, then scale everything down on the Z, so it's like that. And then we can scale that way up. Something like that. And give it the same particle system we gave the icosphere. Make sure the source... No, not so... Where? Make sure the show emitter's turned off. And the shadow is off. And we give it the same invisible texture. We go over here. Now we have an asteroid belt, which I like this more, actually. We can duplicate it, pull it inwards a little bit, rotate it a little bit, do that a couple times to give, a bit more to the belt, rather than just one single one. You can actually wiggle their rotations a bit, so there's a bit more variation in it. We do it like this, which is how I did it in the last tutorial. We can pull all of these rocks up close together. And around we'll get rid of our light for a second. Actually, we will pull them closer and shrink them down. And on the particle sim, we will increase the scale by a lot. Let's actually increase it by a lot, and then shrink this way down. What? Selected the wrong thing. Select all of these. Scale them way down. Way down. To where they're basically invisible. Like that. Now we still have our asteroid field, and we can make a sun in the center of this. Come over, add a light point. Give this point a kind of yellowish-orange color, and then a huge exposure and an absurd power level. Well over 9,000. That's way too much. Let's cut that in half. Cut that in half again. Keep cutting that in half until it's something approaching reasonable. Okay, I went way too hard on the power on this. Instead of a half, let's cut it in fourth. In half one more time. We'll turn off soft fall off. Lower it in half by half again. Cut it in half one more time. That's not the right button. Cut it in half one more time. There we go. Something like that. Lower the power a little. There we go. There we go. Something like that. Now we can add a cylinder, a UV sphere. Scale it up just a little. Give this a new texture, and we will turn off its shadow so it doesn't hide our light. And on this texture, we will make a star shader. Kind of, sort of. That, we'll just delete this. Give it an emission shader. Bring out a color ramp. Pure white. Bring that up closer. Give it kind of a yellow. And then all the way light. And then on this one, we'll make it more orange. And then on this one, we'll make it red. Then we'll give a noise texture here. Or actually, we will do a wave texture. And then just way up the distortion. Something like that. This is not what that's supposed to be. Bring that up. Put that here. Something like that. Actually get rid of that white. We will have this be more yellow. This be more orange. Red be a bit more orangey. Something like that. And then we can take the same wave texture here. We're going to drag the factor out of here into a multiply. We are going to connect the multiply into the strength of the emission. And we're going to increase that till it's real bright. Say 50. Something like that. Put in another red. Then darken that red a little. Something like that. Up the distortion even more. Give it detail. Detail scale, something like that. Lower the scale. Some kind of like that. Looks solar massy. And we can add a displace. And we can put that into the scale, or rather the height. Up the scale. Something like that. And now we have a sun. Well, actually, let's bring back that other icosphere. I think with both of them there, it works a bit better. But we will make this have its own separate hair modifier by clicking this thing. And we will make its asteroid smaller. About like that. And now there is some weird going on over here, where our cylinders are overlapping, but we can fix that by just going into the render properties, into the, where is it? Not compositor, it's light path. Where? Into light paths, and up the transparent one more time, and that fixes that. And now, if we want, we can add some planets in here. Let's add a sphere, mesh, sphere, bring it over here, make it much larger. Something scales all kinds of off. Put it about maybe here. Shrink it a little. And give it its own texture. Maybe just kind of. Maybe we use our asteroid texture as a base and then mess with that. Duplicate it. Zoom in a bit. Then on this, we can come over here, shading. Good look at you. We can lower our distance a little, something like that. Shade smooth. Change this a little. Up the scale, up the detail, up the scale by a lot. Something like that. And then we can add like this. Move that a little. Then we can just take that, scale it up a little. Maybe put another one over here. Bring it over on the Y, scale it up. Just duplicate that, give it a hue. And then change its hue around a little. Up its saturation a bit, 'cause why not? Gives us a different looking planet. Can do that a couple more times if we want. Do some other planet textures maybe. But I think that for our purposes is good enough. Pretty decent space background. Of course, this isn't actually a background. It is its own scene. So now we have to take this scene and turn it into a background that we can plug into anything else we want in the future. And to do that, we will of course need a camera. So we're going to bring in a camera. And we're going to zoom it out. Maybe we'll have it positioned wherever we want to position it is fairly important, because that'll be where our center point is. But let's do something like this. Still pretty uniform, but that's better. We'll bring one of the rings a bit further in. There we go. Rotate it maybe like that. And then like that. Yeah, that's better. I like that. We'll do this. as our viewing angle. Now that we actually have this all set up, our environment done how we want it, which again, this is just an example, play around with it however you want. We will come over, we will select our camera. So in our camera, we will select it, pull up our camera data, and on the lens type, we will change it from perspective to panoramic. And from fisheye, whatever that is, we change it to equirectangular, or however the heck you're supposed to say that. I don't know, so I'm saying it wrong on purpose. With it set to a panoramic equirectangular, it now looks very strange. And that is because what our camera is doing now is essentially taking a picture of all of the angles around it and compiling it into a single frame, or single image. Think of it like how when we stretch a map of the planet out onto a paper, but instead of looking down onto a globe, we're looking from the inside of the globe out, if that analogy works at all. And with it now set like this, we can take our scene format and we are going to increase our image resolution. We're going to do times, let's say times 3 on both of these, asterisk 3, to make the image significantly larger. Though, probably shouldn't go higher than times 3. When I tried that a second ago, it crashed on me. And now we are going to hit render image and render out the image. Once the image is rendered, we're going to come up here to image and say save as, and save it somewhere on our computer where we'll remember it. And with that image saved, we can actually go File, New, General, save that, and open up an entirely new Blender instance, a new file to mess with. And of course, once more, delete the default cube and its hangers on. And then we can go over to shading. In shading, we can open up and go into world, like before. But instead of doing all of that setup with the noise textures and the color ramps and everything, we can instead just pull this out, go environmental texture, and we can open up that image we just made as an environmental texture. And with that, we can go over into our layout, turn on rendered view, and boom! Our background is just there. And we can put this into any future project we want. Now it does pinch at the bottom, and if you look all the way up at the top, but if you don't look straight up in your scene, that doesn't really matter. And there you have a space background that you can put a spaceship in, or have your bigger planet like right over here doing stuff, or whatever you want it for. And of course, you don't need to have all of the asteroids or the planet or the sun in it. You can make it as simple as just the stars, but that's boring. But there's also something really interesting we can do if we have a video shot in the Panoramic Equirectangular format. So for this, I've opened up the Blender video editor version, made sure the screen resolution matches, and plopped in a song from the YouTube audio library. And then stretch the one frame we have to match the length of the song. And now I am going to render this, which is going to keep the same frame aspect and put the song into the whole video. And now while that's rendering, if we go to Google and type Google 360 metadata injector and go to this GitHub page, we can download a file that, when extracted, will create this application. And by running our newly created video in the Equirectangular format into this, it will input the metadata information required for places like YouTube to recognize it as a VR video. If I load that video into the thing, it recognizes it automatically as a spherical video. And when I hit inject metadata, it'll open up a spot where it tells me where to save it to. And then when it's done doing that, it'll say it successfully saved file to space, whatever the original name was, and then it'll add injected to it. And when it does that, you can then upload that to YouTube, and YouTube will treat it as a 360 VR video, which I think is pretty cool.